Hi guys, welcome to the video and welcome to this beastie here. This is the Toliss A321. It's 4X plane and it was relatively recently released. Now obviously it's going to be the subject of today's review, and in time-honoured fashion what we're going to do is have a look at the outside, the inside and take it for a flight. However, due to the unique nature of Airbus systems and flight management guidance and limitations, etc., what we'll do is we'll include a little delve into the MCDU, the flight management system for want of a better way of putting it, and also we'll have a look at some of the flight dynamic limitations. Now although it's going to be an in-depth review, it's also not going to be a fully in-depth tutorial about how to use all of these systems, because for example the manual just to use the real-world flight management system, the FMGS, that's over 700 pages. Now I'm conscious there are a wide variety of iterations on the Airbus across various sims, so as I say we're going to have a look at this on its individual merits through the exterior, the interior, systems and flying. Now it's worth noting that Toliss also have an Airbus A319. It's an earlier iteration. This has developed on from that in terms of modelling and systems. However, as I understand it, quite a few of the elements of this are going to be retrofitted, for want of a better way of putting it, into the A319. Now I've got a short route set up for the flight. It's one that I commonly use because it has things like stepped departures for the SIDS, etc. So it'll give us an opportunity to have a look at various things. Now obviously with the flight, although I'll be flying it real time, I'll edit the video and just chop out the bits where not a lot's happening. So without further ado, let's have a look at the exterior. Now in terms of the exterior, the aircraft ships with two liveries, both looking like this. The Toliss A321 company livery, I suppose, is the best way of describing it, but it's got one livery for the fact it's got CFM engines and one livery for the fact it's got IAE engines. And it's worth mentioning that both engines are modelled in the sim. So in general terms, looking at it from a distance, it's a very nice looking model. An Airbus is as an Airbus does. However, I don't know whether it's the angle I'm viewing it from, but this nose looks a bit weird to me. Let's just duck ourselves down a bit. I'm not convinced about the nose profile, but I've not looked at the photos in depth. Right, so from afar, it's a very nice looking model. It has to be said that the 3D modelling at distance is very, very nice. The engine's very nice, the fuselage is a nice looking shape, the tail up the back of the aircraft is nicely modelled, and the overall impression is of a very high quality 3D model. So what we need to do now is have a bit of a closer look. So I often find that it's when you look at the models more closely, things become apparent in terms of both the 3D modelling and the textures. At a distance, this thing looked absolutely fantastic. What I will highlight is the lighting from X-Plane 11 works really, really well with this. Now, one of the key things I look for is where it's supposed to be curved, I look for curves, and where it's supposed to be straight, I look for straight bits, and where it's supposed to be compound shapes, so curves within curves or curves in different planes together, I look for those complex curves. I also look at joins in terms of textures, panels, etc., and we can see a lot already. So if you look just up here, just between the door and the window, we've got a small black artifact which is from the textures. I've had a look at it in terms of third-party community repaints and it's still prevalent there. So this is the kind of thing that for me I'd rather not see. But as I say, these things aren't always prevalent until, or aren't always visible, I should say, until you get a closer look. Now at the moment it looks very nice in terms of its shaping. If we go a little bit closer, however, what we end up with is sort of, let's just get in here. Maybe it's a little bit too close and I'm a little bit too critical, but some of the circles here you can see are straight lines. Some of the curves, straight lines, and that's something that is a feature down the aircraft, that occasionally you have areas where I would expect a curve, but it's a bit more of a straight line. We'll see a little bit of that down here by the wing route. But the overall shaping is very pleasing to the eye, likewise the opening doors. Now it's worth mentioning at the moment that there's no external support in terms of GPUs, ground power units, etc., but I suspect that's going to be inbound. Now in terms of the 3D model, you can see that it's nicely festooned with some ancillary 3D bits such as the pitot tubes, etc., radio stuff, aerials on top of the fuselage, GPS or whatever these are over here, So overall it's got all the bits and bobs bolted on that you would expect to see on an average airliner. So I've dropped down a bit to have a better look at the textures. Now this is one of the static ports. You can see if I zoom in a little bit, the writing is illegible, the texture is not particularly high definition, and it's not particularly crisp. Likewise, I believe that this is some form of latch for the radome. I might be mistaken, but the reality is you couldn't tell what it is from that. And likewise, as we come down to this hatch down here, the texture again is indistinct and it's illegible, which is a shame. There are other areas where the textures are absolutely epic. So down here, the Tangolini uniform text on the undercarriage. We'll come back to the undercarriage in a bit because it's very nice. But you can see as you look down the fuselage, it doesn't bear close scrutiny. It's not particularly great. Now there are some really nice features such as the weathering, where you've got the streaks of the dirt coming back from the door, but again the textures on the door, they're not particularly great. They're not a deal breaker, but I certainly would have hoped for a little bit more given what X-Plane can do in terms of the graphics. But a lot of areas where I would have hoped for a little bit more in terms of the 3D modelling, in terms of things like the light here for illuminating the wings, etc. I would have hoped for a little bit more detail in that. But it's nice to have the opening doors, etc. And as you can see from this position, as you look inside, the interior is very nicely modelled 3D wise. Likewise, let's just come up a little bit. We can see into the cabin, and from the exterior the cabin is very, very nicely modelled. So it's kind of a mixed bag. There's some lovely 3D modelling of the fuselage. The text and the textures look very good at a distance. There's a few artifacts like the little black mark we found up here, but on closer inspection some of the texturing loses its resolution quite quickly. Now it may just be me, but my benchmark for 3D modelling is actually in relation to things like the undercarriage. And I have to say, the undercarriage on this add-on are absolutely spectacular. There's no other way to describe it. So if we just take a look down here to start with, the wheels, the wheel hubs, the tyres, etc., they all look absolutely fantastic. The chrome of the oleos is great. The suspension unit as a whole is really, really good. And it's things like the hubs. The hubs are a work of art, and you can go really quite close in, and they're very, very well modelled. Little bit of squaring off or straight lining of the circles as you get in this close, but that's to be expected. But when you start to look at things like this up here, this is a phenomenal piece of modelling in terms of modelling the pipes, the tubes. This is your steering arm for your nose wheel steering. Lovely bit of texture for the lights to make it look like the real light. And you can see, looking at it from this side, the runway turn-off lights are nicely domed in appearance, with a certain amount of reflection showing in them. Nuts and bolts, very, very high definition going down here. If you look at this, the nuts and bolts, really nicely done. Not quite sure what's happening with the texture down here. That might be down to me using the camera instead of being a flaw with the modelling, because I have to say the modelling, look at the pin through here, the lock pin, and yeah, absolutely brilliant. Attention to detail with the springs. The 3D modelling of the nose gear is staggering, and then likewise, the text is still very readable at a very close distance. Just superb. So a couple of areas that I always look at as well. One is around the wing root section, the kind of fairings or body panels that are around here with the fuselage joint, because obviously it's not the easiest thing to do, and then obviously the actual wing root itself. And we've got another little artifact down here from the textures, which is a bit of a shame, and likewise the texturing around here is inconsistent. It's got areas where it's dark and then light patches, and it's not really clear whether that's deliberate or not, but the fact that there's this break here is very noticeable. Now when you're looking at the wing root here, it's fairly agricultural is the best way to describe it. You can see the straight lines here now quite clearly, and I will mention there's a big trade-off here in terms of frames per second. I generally get 5 to 10 more frames per second than the Flight Factor A320, and in fact if you look down here, my current frames per second, although I am paused, 60, 61. If I take the pause off, 66, 67, etc. I'll just put the pause back on because I don't like the noise. Engine intakes nicely modelled. Chrome effect for the actual front of the engines. It's chrome for the anti-icing. Basically it uses hot bleed air from the engines to heat this area so that it doesn't form ice. But the fan blades, they're not overly well detailed, which is a bit of a shame. And then inside the intakes you see we lose a bit of resolution again. So when you get close into things like the wingtips, you can see that it's got the static wicks on the trailing edges here, static wicks on the trailing edges of the ailerons, etc. Nice details, nice attention to detail. And to be honest, in terms of the textures here, you don't really get that close into to most wingtips to be overly excited about the standard of texturing on the wingtip of an Airbus A321. But looking back down the wing, in terms of the shaping of the wing, you can see that at a distance it's very, very good in terms of the overall shape. So just have a quick look in towards the engines, and in terms of the cowlings, they've got nice clear lines, bit of straight lining every now and again. The markings and the text are really quite nice. Likewise, the 3D modelling with the strake here. And things like this are aerodynamic elements added to control the airflow in a particular direction. So, looking at the pylon, it's becoming quite granular. It's not particularly great in terms of its appearance. Likewise, at a distance, it looks really quite respectable. So that really is a personal preference thing. Now, time for me to get all excited again when you look at the 3D modelling down here. I'll be honest, this is just simply staggering. Absolutely staggering. The 3D modelling here is superb, and things like the guide plate here with the pipe going through, you can see it's got a clear and distinct hole. It's not just sort of adjoining it. It's absolutely superb. The texturing, the colours, the lighting, all really, really good. The intricacy of the pipe work and the actual hinge joints for the scissor hinges, very, very nice indeed. In terms of the brakes, you can see all the brake pots around here. You can see everything on the inside of the hub, which is very rare to receive this attention to detail, but I think overall the undercarriage is a real highlight for me. The way it's been modelled is just superb. It does have the doors, despite not having the service equipment, it does have the doors operational in terms of open and closing, and again the 3D modelling of the mechanism for it is very nice. Just a touch of low res texturing here and a bit more straight lining, but although I mention it, at the end of the day, when you start looking at things like this sort of distance where you might have it on your external cameras, you're generally not going to notice it. It's only when you start to go really close in that it becomes a visible element of the add-on. So just having a look here, you can see that the cargo bays, etc., all very nicely done and very pleasing to the eye. The takeaway in terms of the exterior is that it only comes with one livery. However, the community have kindly generated quite a long list of liveries available for this aircraft, so you're not going to be short of liveries, although the obvious thing is, being community generated, they vary in quality. I have to say some of them are really nice, really pleasing to the eye, and I would highly recommend having a look at them. Now, in terms of the 3D modelling, it's been done to an exceptionally high standard for, I would say, a very high percentage of it. The only thing is that when you get really close in, some of the areas around the wing root and the wing root fairings start to lose a little bit of fidelity where they're overlapping or connecting in terms of the 3D elements. And it just so happens that those areas obviously show up due to the texturing. It's got its pros, it's got its cons, but on the balance of things, as I say, I'm more than happy. So welcome inside. You can hear, obviously I've got the APU running at the moment now, so that I can show off the lighting and the switchgear in here, which, it has to be said, is very, very nice. But before we go through that, we're just going to mention the texturing and the 3D shaping. Now, the 3D shaping in here, I think, follows the trend from outside in that it's very, very good. It's got all the things that I would expect it to do. So, for example, the windscreen pillars actually look like they've got depth and they are substantial bits of kit. They're not just there for decorative purposes. Likewise, as we come around here, you can see that actually the panel combing here is very nicely done. Doors, recesses, pockets, drinks holders, etc. Everything is really nicely done. And as you look over here to where the window handle is, again, you know, there's no cause for complaints here really. Looking down here, you've got a very nice area. Unlike the Aerosoft version, you can't have the table out, which is a shame. You can move the rudder pedals, they're fully animated, as are the toe brakes, which is nice to see. And then over here you've got the stick, which typical Airbus. It's not got much of a throw, but yeah, it moves nice and smoothly. I think one of the last aircraft I reviewed, the stick was like you'd press, and then it'd just go like that. So it's nicely animated. It seems to be proportional to the control movements that I'm putting in. Likewise, the rudder pedals are not suddenly just jerking to a position. They're smooth and progressive as an animation, which we like. When you look at the panel, the 3D modelling has got a good level of depth to it in terms of relief. So panels, you can see, are all different relief levels, which makes the sense of immersion and the feeling of it being a proper 3D cockpit very, very good. Knobs, dials, etc. Certainly the knobs, you can see that they've got wearing on them. Where necessary, they're all different and unique. There doesn't seem to be a lot of overlap where it's just a case of chucking stuff at the screen. And obviously we've got the widescreen tellies all over the place, which unfortunately they don't pick up HD TV channels yet, but never mind, maybe one day. Now as we come down, oh, don't want the throttles in that position, we'll bring them back here. That click is a very distinctive click. Again, it's a different sort of noise, and that's one of the things I like, is that quite a lot of the noises are unique to the switches in a lot of cases. So that's a different noise to that noise, which is really nice in that respect. And again, you can see the lighting starting to take effect a bit better down here as we get to the slightly darker recesses of the aircraft. Likewise, you can see that the text is clearly readable, and actually that's one of the things I would highlight in terms of the texturing, is whereas the textures outside were at best agricultural or vague, in here everything is absolutely gin clear, so you can still read, you know, even this far out, which is really, really good, because there's some cockpits you go into, some add-ons, where you cannot read it and you end up either screwing your eyes into a ball trying to read it or zooming in for every little thing, and you know, there we go. It's a bugbear of mine, but you can change it. Is if you're scrolling in and out and you happen to come across something that's clickable, quite often you'll do yourself a disservice, and it is a bit of a shame. But scooting to the overhead, we'll just come up and look at it like this. Typical Airbus, and it's the dark cockpit principle. So basically, if it's dark, it's functioning as it should do. If it's got an amber light, obviously it's some sort of warning or caution. If it's white light, it's a state that you've selected. So if we come over here, you know, generator faults, we can turn it off. That will actually get a caution, a ding, but it's decided not to. There you go, master caution, and we'll silence that, we'll get rid of that, put it back to its normal state, and obviously once we power up, the faults will disappear, they'll all be out of the way. So I will make mention of up here in terms of fuel pumps. Those are familiar with the A320, A318, 319, etc. We'll see a different fuel panel to this. The layout of the fuel tanks in the A321 is slightly different. You can see instead of having 2 pumps for the left wing, 2 pumps for the centre and 2 pumps for the right wings, it's got transfer pumps instead, as how they're labelled here. You can select to do everything manually, but for me, the whole point of an Airbus is that it's designed to do things on your behalf without you having to worry about them. So why on earth would I want to do something when there's a nicely primed, very expensive computer there for me? Likewise, just to point out, although it's an electric jet, i.e. it's fly-by-wire, and pretty much everything needs some sort of electrical source to work, that's not exclusively the case, but correspondingly there's a large amount of redundancy. So for example, we've got 3 hydraulic systems and an electric pump that can provide backup. So even if you lose 1 or 2 hydraulic systems, which would be incredibly unlikely, you've still got a fair amount of resilience available to you. So it really is quite a clever system. And if you go through the QRH, the quick reference handbooks for the emergencies and the failures, which you can find online, the number of potential permutations of all these switches is absolutely ridiculous. Now obviously for some of these things there'll be memory items, there'll be SOPs that airlines use in terms of how they manage their emergencies. So for example, they won't necessarily do anything below 400 feet in a takeoff, other than maybe cancel a warning or whatever. But each company has different but probably similar SOPs in many respects. But still, as I say, dark cockpit principle is that if everything's unlit and off, then you're in a good state to play in an Airbus. It's all very good. And likewise, if it's blue or green, then it's in a state where you've put it into that condition and you may need a reminder concerning it. So coming back down to the main panel. Now, auto flight. Now, there's two fundamental bits to the auto flight. There's the MCDO, and then up here we've got the main control panel for it. And Airbus, because of the way it's designed, has some unique features compared to other airliners. One of them is this area here, which can sometimes cause a bit of confusion. And there is an old sort of saying that new pilots kind of go, well, why is it doing that? And old pilots just go, oh, it's doing that again. It can be something that's challenging initially, but one of the reasons for that is that we don't have hands in the sim. We have a little pointer, and as you see, this little pointer can hover over this. Now, I don't know if you can see, right in the middle of it, it's got a single dot. That means you're going to pull it. It's at the top of the push it, sorry. Whereas if it's at the bottom, it's got two dots and you can pull it. Now, I've got a 4K monitor, so I suspect that may be why it's so small. I suspect it might be that on a 1080p it's slightly larger, because you can see the size of the hand here for the speed Mac switch over is considerably smaller, than my pointer. Now, admittedly, because I've got visual challenges, I have a slightly larger than normal pointer in many cases anyway. But I have found over the years that I really do like the logic behind how the Airbus works. For me, I find it simplifies a lot of things. It's very well laid out, it's very logical in terms of how it works. And although the underlying systems are complex, what's presented to you as a pilot is relatively simple. So obviously the overhead panel is the biggie in terms of just, before you take off, make sure it's all dark or something that you want it to be lit. And likewise, this will tell you who's got control of what. So what you do at the end of the day is you push it towards the computer to tell it you want it to have control, and you pull it back towards yourself if you want the control. Now, at the moment, it's not going to do a fat lot of anything because I haven't got anything programmed into the MCDO. But it's very, very straightforward overall. And some things like the auto throttle are, pretty much automatic. As soon as you power up and go charging off down the runway, auto throttle is there for you to befriend you on your ongoing trip. But really, there's not a lot here that, once you're used to it, is going to become problematic. So really, it boils down into 3 or 4 sections, I suppose. The first one is your EFIS, your electronic flight instrumentation. That's all held within that. Then you've got your auto flight controls, which are held within this. Then you've got another set of EFIS stuff over here. And then you've got your, I suppose the best way of describing it is your annunciator section here, which is telling you what everything's doing. So on face value, it's really quite straightforward. Now, this isn't going to be a full tutorial. We will cover bits in the MCDO in terms of testing the aircraft and see what it does and whether it does things correctly. But one of the things I'll point out is that there are a plethora of Airbus models out there in the marketplace for all sims. And they're very complex systems underlying this. And I don't envy the people who have to program it. However, there's an awful lot available in terms of behind the scenes stuff that you can do. I mean, we're all familiar with the idea of you chuck your flight plan in, you go take off, you fly from A to B, you land, and jobs are good. But one of the things in the real world is that a lot of variation or changes takes place along that route. So you might get holds, you might get descend, be level, flight level 80, 10 miles before wherever. So you can get things that, unless you're flying on VATSIM or Pilot Edge or something like that, you're just not going to get unless you're in that multiplayer environment, that particular controlled multiplayer environment, really. Just flying offline, it's not going to be something that really bothers you, because you're not going to be deviated off track, so you're not going to end up with the gotchas from that, and you're not going to be deviated from your anticipated flight profile, vertical profile. But this has a lot of tricks up its sleeve that it can help with. And one of the things I've noticed is that when I've gone through several different of the Airbus family on different sims, they all have a greater or lesser degree of implementation. Some have more than others. Some have less, but it's better implemented and whatnot. One of the things I'll say about this is this aircraft has never given me a crash yet, and in terms of software crashing. And for me, it's generally flown profiles really, really well. So both vertical and lateral profiles, it generally seems to do it really, really well for me. So I do like this aircraft, this particular version of this particular add-on, I should say, in terms of the auto flight. It does seem to work very well for me. So what we'll do now is just jump down to the MCDO, and we'll scoot that a bit over there. In fact, if I do that, we will click on that, although it's not doing anything at the moment. We'll scoot down here and we'll scoot over that way a bit. Okay, so one of the things I mentioned was the FMC or the MCDU or the FMS, however you want to term it, but basically the flight management guidance system, and in this case, particular part of it, the MCDU. For me, it's very straightforward. It kind of leads you by the hand through things, and the terms and terminology it uses are fairly straightforward. It doesn't come up with anything that's ridiculously out there. Now, when it loads up, it comes up with its opening page here, which is the AIRAC cycle 2013. For those who aren't familiar with AIRACs, it's basically your aeronautical information database for approaches, airways, you name it, it's in this database. The first 2 digits are the second 2 digits of the year, so in this case 2020, and the second 2 digits are the edition number or the cycle for that particular release. It says 13 because it's published updated every 4 weeks, and so consequently there's 13 releases in a calendar year, which is really, really nice. Second database down here is the one that it came with when I bought it and downloaded it. As I say, I've only had it a week or so I haven't updated this again to see if this then drops into the second database, but it'd be interesting to see that in the future. And then this information down here isn't really relevant for what we're going to be doing. Now, my absolute favourite bit comes up in a moment, but first of all I'm going to do the initialisation. Now, you'll notice we've got a load button up here. If you click on that, you can load past flight plans, which is Boston, great, absolutely fantastic. There's a difference between the flight plans in terms of some of these have got 01s and some of them haven't. I can't remember which way around is which, but one of these formats is something where I've loaded it in from SimBrief. The other format is where I've saved it from within the sim. And I like the fact that it automatically has come up with load flight plan. When I've pressed that, it's come up with a list of the stored flight plans that I've previously flown in this aircraft. And you can see I've only flown a few. I've not really flown it extensively, but I really, really do like that. Now we're going from Echo Golf Kilo Kilo, which is Gatwick, to Echo Golf Sierra Charlie, which is Cambridge. Bit of a big jet for doing that journey, but there we go. Oh, hang on, have I misentered something? Yeah, I've got 3 Ks. Echo Golf Sierra Charlie, that should work. Boom, nailed it. Right, and oddly it's come up with a second load option here, but it's fundamentally the same thing. Okay, so what we can do then, if you wanted to do, we'll just align the IRS and we get our pretty picture up on our widescreen. What we could do at this point is we could go into flight plan and we could go all the way through manually putting stuff in. So we could go there, we want, I don't know, let's go straight direct to Daventry, Delta, Tango, Yankee, next waypoint, there you go, it's in there, happy days. And you could do that for the whole route, and we'll mention a few bits about messing around with the route later in the video, but get rid of the GPS primary, we don't really want that. And it's simple things for me, like it doesn't have a delete button and a clear button, it just has a clear button. Does what it says on the tin, really. That, you know, that for me is straightforward. Likewise, one of the things it does, which is very nice, is it will present you with, or pre-warn you as to what you're about to do, which we'll see as we start to mess around with stuff. But temporary, basically, temporary flight plan is always yellow. You can erase it or you can insert it, which is basically to make it active. And it doesn't change the active flight plan until you say, I definitely want to change it. But we're not going to go through the whole rigmarole of that. I've got a flight plan, so I'm going to go down to the initialization page and I'm going to tell it I want a particular flight plan, which is that one there. Chuck it in, boom, you can see we've got a flight plan here already forming. Awesome. Now we're going to take the company route. Oh no, we're not. We're going to go flight number ABC 123. Cost index we'll put in as 25. And the cruise, we're only going to go up to 280. And what it does when you put the flight level in, it will automatically calculate the ICAO standard atmosphere temperature for it, as far as I'm aware. And so that's pretty much init page A. There is an init page B. We're not going to do that yet. A lot of add-on sims have the figures that you just click that, double click that, and it automatically puts it in. Here it's a little bit more interactive than that. So you actually have to do a little bit of work to get these figures, but nothing too onerous. So let's just go back to there. And if we go and look at our flight plan now, you can see it's all in there. So we'll just run through it. In fact, before we do that, we'll go 5. We'll go here. Put it to plan 20 miles because we want to actually get a decent, in fact we'll put it to 40 miles because we want to get a decent idea of what we're doing and where we're going. Back down here, scoot that way a bit, and what we can see is one of the things I love as well, don't have to worry about which page it is. Whatever page it's on, just click flight plan, takes you back to the start of your current legs. And I say current legs because obviously as you pass each of these it ticks them off. Now in terms of our flight plan, one of the reasons I've planned to go out of Gatwick on the Kennet 3 per part is because you'll see that I've clicked the constraints button on the mode control panel up there, and you can see in magenta it's got the height constraints, or the altitude constraints I should say, and 2,500 feet or above at that point there. Coming back here to Detling 36, it's 3,000 feet, sorry, and then Detling 43, it's 4,000 feet. So one of the reasons I like to put aircraft through this is because if they've got a dodgy VNAV or a dodgy vertical navigation, the fact that it step climbs with at or above and then at 3,000, a step climb to 4,000, and then there's another 4,000 over here somewhere, which is at 4,000. It's not at or below or at or above. You will be at 4,000 feet. The fact that it's a step climb, it's caught a couple of airliners out when I've done that previously with sims. So it's one that I like to test them on. But we'll see how she handles the first bit of that. Now, what I'm going to just briefly mention at this point is that's a flight plan in. At this point, I could go into the rad nav and I could update the rad nav in terms of what we want for that. Fuel predictions at the moment aren't going to be massively accurate because we're just sat on the ground with 8.94 tons of fuel. And then all the blah-de-blah. And I believe the secondary flight plan does work, but I've just never used it, if I'm honest, just being a bit lazy. Performance as well. If you remember, we can't do the clicky and it's here as well. Comes up with a format error. Let's just clear that, because you're expected to do some work to get these figures. Now, I've previously used a program called TopCat, and there's quite a lot to do with the Airbus where for some reason it's not as easy as say some of the Boeing aircraft to get hold of the performance data. So sometimes what you end up with is a little bit of a challenge sometimes to get particularly your V speeds. However, we can work our way around this. Now, because we've got a route in, it's come up with runway 08 right is for our takeoff, and because we've nominated our runway, this little trick up here can sort it all out for us. So this is in effect our load manager and or simulation control, blah blah blah. The only thing for me is that a lot of add-ons now have the tablet computer down here. The advantage of that is it looks prettier and it's easier to interact with in many respects. The disadvantage is it can have a negative impact on frame rates, which whilst I mention it, frame rates down here, 40 to 41, I generally get between 5 and 10 frames per second more than I do with the same settings on the Flight Factor A320. Now, I'm not frames per second obsessed, but I tend to have it so that the most demanding aircraft or most demanding circumstances of the most demanding aircraft at the most demanding airport, I try and get it to be at or around 30 in the worst case scenario. So it's not really a surprise at the moment that in relatively clear skies we've got 40, 41. It's not a massive surprise at all. But as I say, this is slightly lighter on the frames than some other study level aircraft. Okay, so going through this, you can save situations. It auto saves as well, which is brilliant. So auto save is set on at an interval of every 5 minutes. So in theory, what you can then do is if it crashes, you can then go back 5 minutes. You can reload everything, and I think that's brilliant. Over here, you can change the actual aircraft configuration on the fly, which is great because then you don't have to reload in with some stuff. And then down here, this is fascinating, but I'm not sure that I would necessarily always use it. Now, gross performance is where everything is in your favour. So it's a brand new aircraft. It's absolutely nailed and spot on the figures. It's performing amazingly well. The runway you're taking off from helps it. You know, it's not got dodgy tarmac on it. You haven't got a pilot who's feeling a bit under the weather, etc. And what you end up with is gross performance. So if you've got the best possible aircraft on the best possible conditions with the best possible crew, this is what that aircraft will achieve. What you then have is net performance, and that net performance is, well, the aircraft's getting on a bit now and the engines are due for an overhaul, and you know, the pilots are at the end of their sectors for the day, and the weather's not quite what was forecast, and so you end up with a thing called net performance. And this basically allows you to kind of play around with the idea of what happens if you have a really old aircraft or a really old engine in terms of time before overhaul, etc., which is interesting. I'm not necessarily sure I would use it day to day, but and I'm not really sure, I haven't tried out to see what happens if you have the aircraft there and if you have the aircraft there. I don't know if it impacts on just the performance or failure potential or etc. So a bit interesting over a period of time to see what that impacts on. Now the next one along is loading info. This is just like any load sheet that you've seen before, although it does have a few exceptions. One of the things is that you'll see it says apply. So what you can do is obviously manipulate things before you apply it. And I do like the sliders. They are very effective. But let me just put that back like that. 208, 209 passengers, and what you've got is the two crosses. The black one is your takeoff and the red one is your predicted landing weight. And obviously in here you've got your landing CFG limits and you've got your takeoff CFG limits, etc. And they're explained in terms of these colours. But one of the things that I've noticed with other planners is that you kind of pick a number and you see where it takes you, and then you move it and you see where it takes you and whatever. This one is really good because it basically doesn't apply them until you've clicked this. So what we can do is go, oh well, we've only got 180 odd passengers today, and what difference does that make? 177 in this case. Well, you can see it's dropped both of them down, but actually we're getting close to these this black line here, which is CFG limits. So what we want to do is move it all forwards a bit. So the forward cargo, well, if we have a little bit more forward cargo and a little bit less aft cargo, you can see it's moved it forwards again. So it stops things like this. It warns you when you get to that you really aren't going to have a good day if you do that. And you can move it all over the place, and it's really, I think it's a very slick, very intuitive way of doing these things. Back distribution will just bring them back a bit, and so consequently you can see that, you know, in terms of our performance, it's a really nice visual guide that we're going to be pretty much where we want to be. CFG slightly pretty much in the middle of what we want. We're quite a long way below the maximums, and actually we're below our max landing weight, so actually if we needed to return to the airfield for an emergency shortly after takeoff, we could do so. Really, really nice. Love that. Absolutely brilliant. Now, these are some of the settings that you'll need. What we will do is apply these loads to the aircraft. So our aircraft is now loaded according to that. I will, however, point out at this point in time, the ground services aren't shown on the outside, so although you can select them as to whether they're available or not, they don't actually turn up outside the aircraft. And obviously at some point they're looking at future extension to animated surfaces. But it does include an automatic pushback. These days, when you've got better pushback available as a free utility, it kind of makes these things not quite so important. But if you haven't installed better pushback, or you're having issues with it for whatever reason, it's causing crashes, this is great. Now for me, better pushback has decided it's not working. I haven't got around to reinstalling it yet, so I'm going to be using this. Now aircraft doors I find really weird, because although it's got an auto option, I've found that when I've started it's left doors open, so I just automatically close everything. And I guess one of the things I would say out of this is that this for me is a much more intuitive, much slicker setup than the Flight Factor, and indeed a lot of other add-on aircraft. So for me this is just, I like the ease, and you're not going between pages testing and going, oh, you know, do I do this, do I do that? But I know we're not going to need pushback because we're lined up on the threshold already. All the doors are closed except the cargo down here. And we do have fault scenarios. We're not going to have any fault scenarios. Sound add-ons. So there's add-ons potentially going to be available. I suspect it's going to be is it BSS or TSS sound pack? One of the two. Joystick actions if you wanted to configure further elements of your joystick. But one of the useful things potentially is the DOEN'T positions and sizes for the stick, because obviously unlike say a 737, quite often what you'll do is you'll just put the throttles into the DOEN'T and you leave it for the flight, and you know, everything then goes through the panel on the coaming. And then obviously you've got general settings over here. Startup behaviour, so cold and dark with external power on, for example. Can chuck all that in, save preferences. Really, really nice. Really love this. But this is brilliant. This is a lifesaver. This is for me. As I say, Airbus add-ons quite often have the need for you. It's down here. So trimmable horizontal stabilizer, which is basically your pitch trim prior to takeoff, and also flex temperatures, both of which were a bit of a mystery in many Airbus add-ons. And this makes it dead easy, because actually what this does is it uses the database that it's got, and it says it won't let you do this until you've got your runway selected in your navigation, which we have, and it will say, well, what flap configuration do you want? Well, we'll take flaps 2. And you can see it's automatically now populated with this aircraft weight that we've got set, with this fuel that we've got set, with the distribution, etc., and all that stuff. This is what we need, and it does vary, it does change. Last flight I did, the V1 was 161, 161, 167 I think it was, and the CFG changes and the trim changes here. So I've not had a trim of up 0.9 before on the horizontal stabilizer, but what it means is that this information combined with this information makes filling out blah 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 these pages really rather useful, or really rather good. Let's just realign ourselves or reacquaint ourselves with being straight. So at this point now we can really easily put this data in. So whilst we're on this page, we wouldn't normally necessarily come to this page first. While we're on this page, we'll put the values in. So 159 boosh. Now you'll see that the nice big arrow turns into a nice tiny hand. Really does my head in here, because it's got big little, big little, big little, and it almost as if it accelerates and slows down and accelerates and slows down as you move. I don't think it does, but I'm wondering if that's to do with 4K monitors. I don't know. It might well be that the hand size is because of the 4K monitors. Likewise, one of the things I'll highlight is if I click this, this is the clickable pop-out. For me, I've had it where that's had a bit of a moment and it hasn't let me click any buttons for whatever reason, but it's a challenge. It doesn't let me resize it, you see, and that's quite small, so I tend to use the actual thing in the aircraft. I don't tend to use the pop-out. It does cause a problem with one viewpoint, where I will demonstrate that shortly. But the V2 161, so that's much slower than we were the other day. Now what I need to do is just pop back to init, and we need to go to init B, which is horizontally the next page along, and obviously we can't click that, but we do have the details here. So zero fuel weight was 68.1. Where's my numbers gone? 68.1, which boom, nails that. Block fuel is 8.9. 8.9. Boom, and it works all the maths out for us, which is really good. So that's pretty much that done. Go back to flight plan, and what we're going to do now is we're going to mess around with this a little bit. We're all done, we're all ready to go. We haven't started the engines yet, but this is where I'm going to in fact, we can just do this and do it this way. What we're going to do is demonstrate a few of the things that you can do to mess around with the flight plan and the implementation of it. Now obviously we've got all these points, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to fly that route, particularly if you're on VATSIM or in real world. The chances are you're almost certainly not going to fly that particular route, whether it be changes in arrival procedures, departure procedures, or even just through the route where you need to make some sort of deviation. And this FMS in the variety of Airbus sims has been completed to greater or lesser extents. Now, at this point, I'm just going to mention that there are two main manufacturers of the real-world things, the Thales and Honeywell. And then obviously it's like your home computer. If you imagine a home computer from 20, 30 years ago or whatever, it bears no relationship to what you've got now. The computing power is different, the functions have changed, things have been updated. So I cannot say with certainty that this is right or wrong. It depends on the reference material that the developers have used. Likewise, I can't say exactly what should or shouldn't be available as pages. And that's not just a caveat, that's a reality in many respects, in that these systems have been around for that long that they will have undergone lots of software changes and some hardware changes as well. And whilst a lot of it will be common, there are obviously going to be a few little discrepancies or changes. So I'm not going to go through this in minute detail and go, well, that's wrong, that's right, that's wrong, because I just don't know from the literature that I've got or the literature I've got available. If I had the literature for this particular version number, for this particular MCDU and flight management system, then obviously I'd be able to do that. But obviously what we can do is go through some of the more common elements. We're going to go through a couple of the less common elements as well in terms of manipulating flight plans. So let's just go up here. Let's throw this up to a really decent range so that we can see that's maybe a bit too much. So that we can see what we're doing in terms of messing around with this flight plan. Great, lovely. So obviously it's like any other flight plan in terms of adding, deleting, etc. As I say, one of the things it does do is it tells you with a little dashed yellow line what you're about to do. So if I just move this up a bit, if I get to Kennet here, click Kennet, it focuses on it, but it gives me some options there. And I can have another waypoint beyond it, so let's just put Daventry in there. We're not going to Daventry, but if I put Delta Tango Yankee there, it puts it after Kennet because it's saying next waypoint, and it comes up with this and it's got a dashed yellow line saying, whoa, hang on a minute, you want to go straight off there and then come back further down here. We can do that. Erase the temporary flight plan because we're not going to do that. Couple more ways we can do things is if I want to go to Daventry, I don't have to click on this, I can just go straight to it. So I can go Delta Tango Yankee, and if I click on it there, you'll see that it's put Daventry in. If I can just move that up further down here, and it's just drawn my little yellow line there to say actually you're going straight towards Daventry. You're basically skipping this thing out. And that's one of the things that's notable with this, is if you go to another waypoint that's on your route, it's almost like a direct to. It will go direct to that waypoint. If I were to choose something that is not on the route, so let's go and do this. Let's go Fitbo. That's not on the route, but it's a relatively close point. It's not far off the route. So if I go Fitbo, let's get back to, oh no, there's Kennet. Bosh it on there. You can see now what it's got is an intercept for Fitbo now. So this is the point where we would have gone to Kennet, and we've told it we don't want to go to Kennet. Let's have a trip to Fitbo first. And so what it's done is it's taken us all the way up to Fitbo, and it's got the option to intercept back towards Kennet. That's where the discontinuity is. So if I just click clear, then we'll get an image of what we're doing, which is intercepting and then coming back for Kennet. And again, it's not something we want to do, but it demonstrates that there's multiple ways of doing that. So you can change it by overtyping, you can change it by clicking on it and putting next waypoint, new airways, new destination, etc. You can do a lot in here. Now in this page, this is a revision from Octad. You can do something very similar to how the Boeings do their situational awareness. So situational awareness, you can see you've got fix info up here. It's notable that I don't think that that's on the flight factor. I might be wrong, but if we go to fix info for Octad, we have to just pop it in again. Octad click on there, it comes up with the reference fix, and this is in effect the fix that we are using to create our area that we're going to operate in. And you can see that if it says report 10 miles before octad, or descend to be flight level 140 10 miles before octad, whatever it might be, you can go octad. I need to be 10 miles before that. If I put the radius in, you get your blue circle, so you know that if you cross that blue line you need to be at whatever altitude you were cleared to. Really nice for situational awareness. Likewise, it's actually really useful for doing DME arcs. So if you have a 10 mile DME arc around an airfield, you can put a 10 mile circle on and you can just use your heading and drive around the ring. Really useful to be able to do that. Now what you can also do is you can put radials in, and it will allow you to do 2 radials off the same reference point. So if I go 180, we'll have a radial that will come straight out to the south. If I then also go 090, I can put a second radial in, and you see you get this here. Clear that, get rid of it completely, and we're back to where we started. So really useful that in terms of situational awareness. Now unfortunately, one of the things that's not implemented, I don't believe anyway, is an offset. An offset is where you basically go, you know what, there's something happening down this leg round about here, I don't want to fly through that, I want to fly 5 or 10 miles or whatever off to one side and parallel my existing track. That's called an offset, and I don't believe this allows it. Yeah, it would normally be about here in the MCDU. So unfortunately we can't do that, but never mind. Likewise, we can't do a long track waypoint, so let's go to Kennett. And normally what you'd be able to do is do Kennett. I don't believe it can do it. I hope it can prove me wrong. Kennett slash, and then if you put -10, it goes 10 miles prior to Kennett. If you put just 10, it will go 10 miles after Kennett. So let's do that. And I think it comes up with an error. Yeah, format error. So it may be me with a format error, but as far as I'm aware, it should be able to do a long track waypoints either in advance or after a particular waypoint. And here what we're doing, a lot of this is working out waypoints in terms of messing around with our current flight plan, and we're altering the flight plan with known quantities here, either adding before, adding after, whatever. However, what we might need to do is have an off-track waypoint, something where it may not have a waypoint in the database, so something where you could create a waypoint. Now in the real thing, normally what you do is you come down to data and you'd have a second data page. We don't have it here, so it doesn't matter how much I press that button, it won't give me the second data page. And the second data page is where you can have you can set pilot waypoints, and you can set a number of waypoints. I forget off the top of my head how many it is, but you can set all these individual waypoints that you can then either use for reference or you can use for inclusion in your flight plan, however you wish to use it. However, we can do point bearing distance with this. So what we do is go back to our flight plan, and we want a waypoint, I don't know, 20 miles south, 30 miles south of Kennett. What we can do is go find Kennett, and we can go Kennett 180 at 30. And we'll overtype Kennett, so we'll just pop it straight in there. My eyes aren't working properly, and you can see it's created this temporary thing going, hang on a minute, is this where you want to go? Now in this case it's not where we want to go, but what we're going to do is we're going to use this at a later stage when we do get airborne, and what we can do is a really neat trick. So let's get rid of that, erase the temporary flight plan, back to where we are. Now the other button of significance is the Direct To button. It's standard fare with Direct To, so you'd pick a point. Let's just, for argument's sake, Kennett can have a bit of love today. Direct To, click that, and it chooses the Direct To mode, or you can do a beam points. Now I haven't managed to get a beam points to work quite. Is that it there? I don't know. I've not quite managed to get the abeam points to work. In fact, yes, it is there. That little green diamond. Let me just zoom in a bit. 5. Zoom in. It has marked the abeam points. Look. Oh, brilliant. So in effect, this is our original route, and these waypoints are in our flight plan. We've said we're going to direct to Kennet, but when we've done that, we've done it with, let's just pop back down here. You can see why having a pop out is quite useful with this. You can see that what we've got here is it has retained. It's not letting us shift the flight plan at the minute. But basically the abeam points, what it's done is it's gone, well, that's the direct to, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to report on all the abeam points, and you see it starts with AB, so AB interception, or intercept is that one, AB, the abeam point for Delta 06 Tango, which is there, AB, so abeam point Detling 43 there, and so on and so forth. So that is really cool. That allows you to go to direct to, but they might say, you know, flight route direct to Kennet, report passing a beam, I don't know, Detling 43, for example. And that's a very nice, easy way to do it. So, chuffed to bits that that's in. We will obviously cancel the direct to because we're not going to do anything with it. But the last one in terms of that is, again, we'll go to Kennet, we'll pop up to Kennet. It's getting a lot of attention today. And it's got the direct to automatically selected, but we're not going to do direct to, we're going to do this one here, which is the radial in. So the radial in, radial out. So let's do the radial in, the 180 radial heading inbound. And if we pop that there, you'll see that this turns yellow, and now we've got a 180 radial heading into Kennet. What that means is if I then enable the flight plan, make it active, it will skip everything before that, and it will say, oh, you've got a route that you want to fly as an inbound intercept to get to Kennet. So basically what it's expecting us to do is fly this way. When we get to that, it's going to expect to take us into Kennet and out to Ugnus. So there's quite a lot of stuff in here that has been enabled. However, the question then turns around and says, well, how much are we really going to use it? Now, I think the argument is, if it's going to be a true study sim, it has to be something where the facilities are within it. This is my idea of a definition of study sim. You get a lot of things where it's, oh, it's a study sim, it's a study sim, it's a study level aircraft. For me, a study level aircraft is something where it's not a study in textures, it's a study in as much as could somebody who uses this real world use this as a tool for either training, practicing, learning, or just really enjoying the routine techniques that they would use. Likewise, it's not every day that someone's necessarily going to do a radial in direct to for a waypoint. I don't know. I don't fly the Airbus, so I can only speculate on that. But obviously, if it's something where you're learning the Airbus and the vagaries of the Airbus, it's really nice to have a tool where you can actually go, hey, this is what I'm trying to get to grips with. Let's have a practice in a sim where I'm not going to spend inordinate amounts of money, and I'm not going to have to smash my head off books hoping something goes in. I've got the opportunity to practice it. So overall, I think personally that it's a very, very good representation. It's not complete, as I say, because it hasn't got the second data page, so we can't do anything with that in terms of creating waypoints through that, but we do have the option to do point bearing distance from certain waypoints. So if you like, if we've got a reference point to start with that's on our flight plan, because the thing with the pilot generated waypoints is you could do it with a lat long, you don't have to have it referring to your flight plan. And when you do pilot generated waypoints, it has the choice to do by lat long, it has to do point bearing distance from a known location, or bearing distance or known location bearing, so two bearings intercepting, if that makes sense. But unfortunately we can't do that straightforwardly with this. Now arguably you could do a long track waypoint of sorts, because you could have a flight path or a flight plan where you go Kennet and then you go back to a point bearing distance on the reciprocal for 10 miles and then back to Kennet. That would give you a waypoint, if you like, that as you approached it you would see it. But you know, for me that's not really, I don't know. Okay, something I probably don't do enough of in my reviews is have a look at the night lighting. So I've made it slightly darker so that we can see what sort of effects the lighting have. One of my long-term peeves about FSX P3D is the lighting. Lighting attachment points quite often aren't where the lights are. So let's just get into this mode, and then we can do this. And as you can see, the lighting points are absolutely spot on. This is a lovely set of lights around here. You can see the lighting now shining off the paintwork. The whole thing has a lovely aesthetic to it. You've got the wing lights here in terms of these two lights on either side here. It should have tail illumination. Yeah, we've got tail illumination for the logo lights. Scooting around the back. Pet hate of mine is particularly prevalent in P3D and FSX. Cool, looks like it's on a bit of an angle here. I wonder how it's loaded in like that. Never mind, that's probably more to do with the sim and everything. We'll see how we get on with the takeoff. But navigation lights, when you're at the back of the aircraft, you should only be able to see the white. When you're around this side, you should only be able to see the green, and we can only see the green here. Shouldn't be able to see the red. If you have a look on P3D and Prepared, this is a real bugbear of mine. Red, can't see the green or the white. And if you come around here, right in front of it, you should be able to see both the red and the green. I'm not quite lined up, but you would normally see red and green. So it's not done a bad job. Landing lights are nice. I do like the halo sort of effect around the lights. Very, very nice indeed. American Airlines in Gatwick. Welcome. But what we're going to do now is we're going to get airborne and see how we get on. So what I'm going to mention is the first 50 feet after takeoff is in direct law. There's different flight laws. We'll probably examine this later as we go into the flight to a very low level. We're not going to get too excited about it because we don't need to get too in depth about the systems. But the first 50 feet, ground to 50 feet, are in what's called direct law. What that means is a direct response to the pilot's controls by the flight control system. It's pretty much similar to a normal aircraft in that behaviour. Above 50 feet, it blends into its normal law. So that's where you get all your Airbus protections. It's where you get, for example, your roll limits, your pitch limits, your speed limits, etc. That's where all of those things help. So we've got everything set up. First constraints there, 2,500 or above, 6,000. Just make sure we push all these away so that it's fully managed. And when it's got a dot next to it, here, for example, and no numbers, that's fully managed. If we pulled it out, that would be us taking responsibility for it. But we want it to do it all. So we've got it all set up. All we need to do is check the config once more. Make sure I haven't messed anything up. Config's fine, and we can let's rock. I need to take the brake off, parking brake, back to that view. Apply some power to the engines and make sure they both respond evenly, and then increase it smoothly. Flex 40 or flex plus 40. Let's try and keep somewhere near the runway centre line. That would be very nice. Nice sound effect as well, by the way. I do like it as it goes over the centre line markings, and it goes dung dung dung. Very, very nice indeed. Approaching V1 and rotate. No doubt we've pretty much, because we've got direct law there up until the point where we've gone past 50, and then it starts to blend. Gear. Flaps can come up one stage, and we'll pop it into autopilot when I can find the button. And the first constraint in magenta here, 3,000 feet, away we go. And actually its climb speed, its scheduled climb speed was quite low there. But now we've got the flaps up, wants us to go back into lever to the climb. So just reduce it till you get the speed on both, and happy days, we're away. Now what I want to do is I just want to see it fly the initial part of this route, just to make sure that GPS primary, we can clear that. Don't need to worry about that there. Let's pop that out. Bring it down here a bit so we get a clearer view, and we're going to have a look at how it actually performs this turn, and then obviously the constraints. So the first constraint was at or above 2,500 feet. Easily going to make that because we're at 3,000 feet and level, so we've made the first and the second constraint already. And turning around nicely. The indications here, by the way, the little yellow bit, imagine that goes through the longitudinal axis of the aircraft, that is your heading, and then the little blue one is your track, as far as I understand it. Maybe not, we'll see. Round the corners we go. Now at this point you'll notice we had cleared it to 250 knots, but notice we've still got a stage of flaps down. So the clever little aircraft has gone, you know what, I can't go any faster because the flaps are limiting that speed. As soon as I raise the flaps, boom, off it goes again. Now it's obviously going to maintain itself till it gets to Detling 36. So Detling as a beacon is somewhere over here, 36 miles behind us. Once we get to Detling 36, it'll initiate another climb. So what I'll do at this point is, whilst the aircraft's just sorting itself out, every now and again I will skip ahead to a point where it's going to be something of interest to us. Okay, so we've now got just over 2 miles to the waypoint, and as soon as we cross that it should go to 4,000 feet. What I'll probably do is, as long as it stops at 4,000 feet and doesn't go above the constraint, I'm pretty happy then that it can follow a SID with relative ease, if I'm honest. There have been other add-ons over the years where constraints on vertical navigation have caused real hiccups, but this appears to be really more than happy with it. And again, you've got the little magenta arrow says I'm in control and I'm taking it up to 4,000 feet for you. We're going up to 4,000 feet. You can hear the engine power's increased, pitch is increased, rate of climb's increased, and we're away. So all I need to see now that is it reaches 4,000 feet and it levels there. You've got the magenta marker here where my little magnifying glass is spinning round. That's telling us the pre-selected altitude that it's chasing. And as long as it levels out at that, I'm going to do the next couple of bits, because I don't propose to just fly along the rest of this at 4,000 feet and then climb towards the end. We've got far too much in terms of busy things to do. It's leveled at 4,000 feet. This thing's going to be quite happy flying this SID. No qualms about it. Absolutely spot on with this so far. Really, really good. So let's just let it get past that. Make sure it doesn't stuff itself up. I've had them before where it gets to this point, it goes 4,000 feet, and then afterwards it forgets it's got the very final point is still at 4,000 feet. This whole route out to Kennet is 4,000 feet on the altitude, so it's just sorting its life out. 0.2, 0.1, and it's changed, and we haven't gone climbing or roaring off. It's got no interest in changing its altitude, so let's get rid of that. Over here we've pre-selected the altitude we want. If we want control, we pull it towards us. So let's pull it towards us. That's giving it the permission to do an open climb, which means we want it to climb to where we want it to be straight away. The other switch that's quite interesting, I've not really used this much, is this switch down here, expedite. Press it and it will do the maximum climb, or conversely, if you're in a descent, it will choose the maximum rate of descent it can within the system's parameters. And I will see you at 28,000 feet. In fact, what we'll do whilst we're doing that, let's not mess around. Down here, I should really use the buttons. It's quicker, direct, and we'll go to Kennet. Let's see what it's showing us. Is it what we're expecting to see? Yeah. So in terms of that, we can go direct to insert, and it's going to spin us around, and off we go down here. Okay, and off we go to Kennet. Once we get to Kennet, I've got another little thing I want to try on it, see what it does, see how it gets on. and we're pretty much going to ignore the SID from this part onwards. So what I'll do is I will meet you again shortly further down the route. Okay, so the next thing, you rejoin me still in the climb towards Kennet. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to assume that air traffic control has decided to reroute us. What we're going to do is we're going to take the heading and we're going to go off to about 270 will do, and we'll take control. So 2 dots, pull it, boom, there we go. Now what you'll notice is it's put our existing flight plan in dashed green lines, because it's basically saying, well, hang on a minute, this is where you were aiming to go, this is not where we're going now. And I want to do this because of sequencing. The waypoints obviously sequence. When you fly along the flight plan, they go through the waypoints, and it knocks off the one that you've just passed. So obviously looking at the flight plan down here, everything that we've gone past or we're pretty much ignoring drops off the tail end, because it makes the assumption you don't want to go back. Now what happens is that sequencing doesn't work if you're not within 5 miles of your intended flight path in the real thing. So what we're going to do is see if it does it here. We'll just pop up here for the prettier view, admiring the X-Plane 11 lighting. Oh, a bit cloudy over there. That's beautiful, isn't it? What a beautiful sight. Really, really nice. Not sure what city that is, to be honest. City or town? From Gatwick heading, oh, I don't know. Milton Keynes, maybe? I don't know. Never mind, let's jump back inside and do our important things. I'm very naughty. I didn't put us onto standard, which is very, very naughty, although we were flying 1013, so it doesn't make much of a difference. So you can see that at the moment Kennet's just over 20 miles away, but if we're flying up here, it's going to pass somewhere about 15 miles. So if I drop a vertical line down here, it's going to come about here. So I would imagine we're going to be 15 miles off from Kennet. But what I want to look at here is, if you see, this has got our off-track or our cross-track error here. So we're 5.3 miles left of our intended flight path, which is important because it shouldn't then recapture the flight path. So if I then turn to a bit further to the right, let's see, let's go somewhere over here about 285, as if we're going to get close to paralleling track. It shouldn't now give me the option to just go back into managed mode here. So if I click it, yeah, you see it won't. I'm too far away from the existing flight path. It just doesn't want to know, which is absolutely spot on. Now what we're going to do is we're going to rejoin our octad. We're going to do that interesting, I say interesting, really, I love this. I think this is a brilliant thing to do. What we're going to do is we're going to do direct to. I'm going to do direct to octad. We're going to do it direct to with a radial. Now at the moment we're flying this radial, so let's say we're going to want that, which is going to be about, let's do 190 inbound, and that's got that, and it says no nav intercept. So obviously what it's saying is, well, I've got the route here, but you aren't on a course to intercept it. But we are going to accept that. We're going to say, yeah, we know exactly what we're doing. And at that point go direct to intercept, and you'll notice it's put us into a different mode, a just desired heading or track, because basically it's saying, well, hang on a minute, you want to do that, what are you trying to do that for? I just don't get it. So at this point we'll just take the heading off it, we'll keep our heading, and we'll just fly towards this, and then what we can do is when we get closer we can see how it copes in terms of intercepting it. So you can join me in a bit. Okay, so as you rejoin me, we're 10 miles right of our intended track, which is this line, which was, if you remember, the direct inbound radial for octad. If I push the button, there we go. Let's put an interception point in. Happy days. And if you notice, it's actually maintaining our heading, but it's now added into the flight plan the intercept. But it's I assume that's then because it's a direct to, as opposed to just having a waypoint in. But what it's going to fly now, hopefully, is the intercept to Octad, and then onwards from there. So yeah, that's quite impressive. Happy with that. And yeah, so what we're going to do at this point, we'll let it get round the turn. We'll mess around with the flight dynamics, see what's what, and then we'll call it a day and come up with some sort of conclusion. And I can then spend hours on this tomorrow trying to edit it. But in essence, now what we can do is it's direct to, although it's got the 285 there, it's actually now got control of it. So I can give it control, make sure it's got it. You can see it's got lat here because it's got lateral control of it. And then once we're round onto our direct to track, we'll see what it says. Yeah, it's reverted to the dashes, so it's got it now completely. Yeah, I mean, there's an awful lot to this this flight management system within this aircraft that's been implemented to a very good standard. There's a couple of emissions, but they're not bugs, they're actual deliberate emissions. So the offset to the left or right, for example, is an emission. And it pretty much does everything that I've asked it to do with aplomb. It's not really struggled with any of it. If anything, it's a far better pilot than I am, or ever will be for that matter. So at that point, what we're going to do is we're going to, seeing as we're cruising nicely towards an overspeed here, what we're going to do now is take the autopilot off and examine the handling. Now, I say handling in an Airbus is, yeah, it's different to virtually every other aircraft. So we'll take the auto throttle off and we'll let it have a lot of power. It's going to come up with a chime, and we'll give it some power to get it to an overspeed condition nice and quickly. So in terms of handling, because of the control laws, in normal control, what happens is you pitch up, you let go, it stays there. If I change engine power, that's now minimum power, it stays there. Push the power fully forwards, it stays there. Roll to the left, it stays there. It's really straightforward. It's very good for doing ILSs in. And we'll just let it go into a self-preservation mode. So the speed's bleeding off, and it has got self-preservation. It will start to tell me it's not happy, and then if I still don't respond to it, it will tell me it's going to take over. So the speed's coming back. Now it's into the point where it's going to start worrying about me. And you can see what it's doing is, because I've got no control input, it's saying that's the minimum flight speed that I want you to have, because anything below that is dangerous. So I'm going to adjust the pitch of the aircraft until such time as we're no longer struggling with that. However, I still have control over the aircraft, so what I can do is be really bad. I can pull back on the stick to the point where it reaches the red line, and if you notice up here, what it's gone is gone, you are a complete and utter moron, therefore I'm going to go to alpha floor, which is a protection mechanism that basically says to avoid us coming to any harm, I'm going to put it alpha floor. You can hear the engines have spooled up, and basically what it's doing is it's giving us the absolute maximum rate of climb without going below that speed. Really good protection system. However, you can't cancel it unless you actually manoeuvre or move the throttles, I should say. And there it goes, it's off again. So let's introduce a bit of power, and what we'll do is go the other way, and we'll see what it does when it's overspeeding. And again, we'll do it in quite a dramatic way. You see this little green line down here? My understanding is that this little green line is the angle that it just won't let you pitch below. Look, full forward stick just won't let me go below that. And we're going to go into an overspeed condition very quickly. Pilots are unconscious or not paying attention, whatever's going on, and it's gone overspeed. Ding 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 ding. You're not going to miss that, and you can't cancel it. But you'll notice that it's raised the nose with the intent of dropping the speed. Look, speed's coming down again. So it's basically saying, I don't want you to be an idiot and rip the wings off either. You're not doing a very good job of it today. You're having a bit of a nightmare. So what we'll do, we'll put it back into a normal flight stage. And so that's normal in terms of the normal flight configuration, the normal law. That's an anticipated and expected behaviour. Let's get rid of that. Now it's shut itself up. And as I say, really nice because it's got a certain amount of stability that once you position it, it remains that attitude. And certainly in terms of instrument flying, one of the things that you learn very quickly is pitch and power equals performance. So if you want a particular, I don't know, for example, glide slope or performance in terms of climb, etc., you set a certain pitch and a certain power on the engines and it will give you that performance. So, you know, hands off the controls here. It's just doing its own thing. So, other protections, it's got roll protection. We've discussed the pitch protection. So you can got the little green markers down here at I think it's, is it 15 or 16 degrees? And then if we pull up, I haven't got any throttles on, it gets to a point as well where it won't go any further. You can see the little greens either side of the 30 degrees. And now it's gone, actually, you know, I don't like what you're doing. I'm going to tell you that I don't like what you're doing. And I'm just going to push the nose back down. Now, this is all in normal law. So the next thing we need to consider is the fact that normal law gives us up to, I think it's 33 degrees of bank, where it will just maintain the bank. I'd have to check in the books really, but it will let you do up to 33 degrees. It's descending because we haven't got any power on, that's why. Let's give it a bit of oomph. Get rid of that. I know there's a problem with that scenery. Okay. So as I say, I think it's up to 33 degrees or something, or 36 or something like that. I'll soon tell you. However, you can go beyond that to 47 degrees angle of bank, but full left stick, it won't let me go any further, and then it recovers. I'll double check the numbers, but it's very, very nice in terms of doing that. Again, anything over, so that's just under 45 degrees. It's gradually bringing it back to its nice. I'm happy with it. 33 degrees. Let's see if we can cause it to go any further. Okay. So normal law gives you a lot of protections. As I say, the numbers for the roll escape me slightly, but I'll pop them in the description anyway. Now what we're going to do is we're going to be really naughty and we're going to go, let's disable that one and that one. And as the pressure bleeds off, we should see, in fact, not that one and that one. We'll get rid of that one. We'll get rid of that one and that one. And here we go. We've got a whole host of failures. Flight controls. That's a whole host of them there. And one of the things you'll notice down here on the eCam is that not only does it list the failures and the problems, but it also, you notice with the actual control surfaces, the ones that are orange, you haven't got. So in terms of roll, for example, I haven't got any of that. You'll notice that at the moment I still have all of my protections in place with this situation. So if I roll, it gets to a point where it won't let me roll any further. Let go, and it will do its normal protections. So all is happy days. Let's go up there and have another mess around. What we're going to do is turn off, let me see, let's turn off that one, turn that one on and that one off. Again, messing around with the hydraulics. Get a different setup here now. Big red light and a yellow light. And if we look at this now, the actual amount of systems we've got available to fly with are very limited. We've lost quite a lot of our systems, but we're still flying. We're still cool, yeah? Still great. However, green and yellow systems, low pressure, flight control has gone into alternate law. Protections are lost. So, alternate law, what protections are lost? What did we say was lost? We said, well, roll was one of the protections, wasn't it? Oh, look at that. No protection there. No protection at all. Is it going to recover us from an overspeed? Warning us. We get the warnings. It's not interested in helping us, is it? And I'm not going to test it because it would potentially crash the aircraft. But look at that. We can get some really impressive, unusual attitudes there. And let's recover. And literally you can do the same unusual attitudes that you do in an instrument rating test, where they put it into a weird attitude and you go, oh, I don't like this, so you roll wings level. In this case we're going down, so the throttle is closed, and then we pull gently to ease out without overstressing the aircraft. Now you'll notice the red line was coming up and down. My understanding is that that's because that relates to the limits in terms of G, what you can pull. Should have cancelled that earlier. Let's plug these back in. So, considering where this is at then, the overall picture as far as I'm concerned, let's go and have a view of it in all its glory. Externally, I'll be honest, I think it's a bit of a mixed bag. 3D modelling is absolutely fantastic. When you look at the gear, the brakes, the undercarriage, etc., it's absolutely spot on. It's amazing. There are some areas where you can see the triangulation, the straight edging, so around the engine coamings, for example, and some of the circular surfaces. And there were some areas where it was rather rudimentary, so around the wing roots where they were joining the fuselage, etc. So there were some areas of the 3D modelling that were absolutely magnificent. There's others where it's not really an issue. You're generally not going to see it. You know, when you're flying and you're looking at the pretty pictures like this, or you're flying in the cockpit, really, you know, it's not the kind of thing that's going to impact negatively. It's just one of those things. Is that light bleeding through the door? Looks like it, doesn't it? Not quite sure. I think it is probably. But let's pause it there. So the exterior textures are a little bit rough and ready. There's a few areas where it's really nice and crisp, but a lot of the textures are illegible or fuzzy or not very clear. And there's also a few artifacts in the texturing. But on the whole, the outside is, I think the best word I always use is okay. It's not the best, but it's also not the worst. So the outside for me is probably the weakest area of the aircraft. Once you move inside, the 3D modelling is, I didn't find any areas where there was cause for concern, where I'd look at it and go, actually, you know what, that looks a bit naff. The interior 3D modelling, the texturing, the relief that was given to instrumentation and switches, etc., was all very nice. Sounds were very nice inside as well, in terms of the clicking of the switches and the knobs and the dials. There was good weathering, or wear and tear, I should say, on the inside of the aircraft's cockpit. So it was all, you know, it was a very good looking internal model of the aircraft. It's somewhere that I could see myself spending a lot of time. Now, in terms of then moving on to the systems, in terms of the flight management system, I think the MCDU is the only awkward thing for me is where it changes the size of between the hand and the pointer in terms of operating systems. I don't know, but I suspect that's down to it not being focused for a 4K monitor, but me using it on a 4K monitor. That's my assumption. However, I think overall the usability of the switches, everything seems to work really straightforward. There's nothing complex where you have to sit down and think hard about how you're going to make something happen. Part of that is going to be down to the Airbus itself in terms of its user-friendly nature for day-to-day flying. Other areas of it will be down to Toliss and their implementation of it. So in terms of the cockpit and how easy it is to use, the sort of ease with which you can control switchgear, etc., for me, I think it's very, very good. It's intuitive, it's straightforward. You know, I've got no real issues about that at all. I personally quite like it. When you then look at the finer details in terms of using the flight management equipment and tools available to you, as I've said before, different developers will develop the systems to different levels, depending on all sorts of things. It might be cost, it might be resources, it might be market driven. Does the market really need us to simulate that or not? And price point, and there's no end of stuff. What material is out there for you to research to actually develop this thing? And as I say, with the Airbus, there's so many iterations of software that have gone on over the last few decades that this aircraft's been in service, that it's very difficult to then turn around and say, well, that is this for me, because I'm not, I've not flown the Airbus in real life. I've not gone through a type rating. For me to sit down and say, actually, bang, that's wrong, is not something that I would be willing to stick my neck out on. So for me, I have to take it from a user's perspective, i.e. what do I as a sim pilot expect, and does it meet those expectations? And I'll be honest, it goes beyond that. Some of the functions that we've had to play around with are not they're not simple things. So where we've got the intercept to the inbound radial to a direct to, that's not a straightforward thing. That's not something that most people would use on a day-to-day basis, but they've gone to that point. The only thing I find slightly odd is the second data page missing, where you can input flight pilot waypoints. And I think for me that's a little bit of a frustration. But obviously it's either something that they've chosen not to implement, or they're going to implement it at a later date. But the good thing for me is that they haven't done it half-heartedly. We haven't got part of a system that nearly works but doesn't quite work. And that's one of the key things for me, is that the systems they've implemented seem to work, and they seem to work well. And I haven't got to a point where I've actually sat there and gone, oh God, I've just trashed all of my flying up to this point because I pressed the wrong button. Part of that's down to Airbus and the way it depicts things on the navigation display. But as I say, as a whole, the flight management side of things, including the controls on the coaming, very, very intuitive. The whole thing for me works. I've got absolutely no qualms. As I say, there's a couple of bits that haven't been implemented, and there's a couple of memory cards, if you like, or memory holders in there for the developers saying, yeah, actually we're working on this. That brings me on nicely to the performance tables and the user interface. My only real criticism of that, and it's the only one, is that having to go up to a plug-in menu to then come down with to get the control panel up, loses for me the immersion factor. So all of the developers who've put their weight and balance, etc., on various sims on the electronic flight bag to the left of the captain's side, obviously what they've got in their benefit there is an immersion factor. But if you take that out of the equation, what Toliss have got in terms of that panel that they use to control everything, and the fact it includes the ability for you to put the config in and the runway length and the runway details of where you're taking off, and it will give you what, I don't know if it's accurate or not, but it appears to be accurate. It's certainly representative. It will give you a V1, a V2, and it will then also give you a flex temperature, which for me is brilliant, because you're not referring to external programs. You can do it all in the sim. The number of factors that are in there in terms of being able to personalize it, the fact that you've got pushback, etc. There's an awful lot of stuff in there that for me makes that a really useful tool. As I say, the only single downside that I could find with it was the fact that you lose the immersion factor, that it's not a panel within the aircraft you can refer to, it's a plug-in that you go up to a menu. So then when we move on to the flight characteristics, I haven't gone through all of it. The actual internal sort of mechanics, for want of a better way of putting it, for direct law, alternate law and normal law, there's an awful lot to that. I mean, that's textbooks of information all in its own right. But what we did do is we had a look at taking a couple of the systems out to get direct law, the fact that you lose the protections, the fact that the protections are in place with normal law and that they work. It all seems to me to be a really good package. But really what I would come round to now in terms of a summary is the following. The exterior model is okay. The interior model is very good. I do like it a lot. The ergonomics of it are really, really good. The flight management side of things in terms of the MCDU and the interaction with that, again, really, really good. The pop-out MCDU, yeah, that didn't work for me, not interested. Maybe a monitor issue on my side. It might not be that it's been developed with a scaling for a 4K monitor, which in fairness, if that's the case, then I would hope it's work in progress, or as we can see, there is you can still use the systems perfectly well without it. And then the final bit really is, I suppose, as a result of all of this, is it good value for money? It's $80, and that for a high fidelity aircraft. And I would go as far as to say that this is a study level aircraft. Overall, I think value for money is very good. I like it a lot, in fact. I think it's been very well implemented, and I hope that the things that they've got place markers for ready to be implemented, I hope they bring those on as well, because that will really start to finish this aircraft off. So I hope you've enjoyed the video, guys. If you did, don't forget to tick like, share or subscribe. Likewise, if you did want to support the channel further, I've got a Patreon page. Details are in the description below the video. But anyways, hope you enjoyed it, guys. Take care.